Let's look at Mark chapter number 6 tonight. We're going to talk some more about leadership and see what we can learn about this tonight. Mark chapter number 6, verse number 31 says this, "And he said unto them, Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place, and rest a while." And I want to say this to you. Number one, I had a heart attack. Number two, I want to say this to you. The more you get involved in leadership, the more that you're going to need that right there to come apart and rest a while. I think it was Dr. on coming apart before you come apart. And he says, let's come apart and rest a while, for there were many coming and going, and they had no leisure so much as to eat. They departed into a desert place by ship privately, and the people saw them departing, and many knew him, and ran afoot thither out of all the cities, and out went them, and came together unto him. And Jesus, when he came out, saw much people, and was moved with compassion toward them, because they were as sheep not having a shepherd. He began to teach them many things. Now, look again what he said there in verse number 34. And Jesus, when he came out, saw much people, and was moved with compassion toward them. Here's what I want to talk to you about tonight, is leadership and people. Leadership and people. And this is chapter 2 in your book. And I'll say this, we're kind of skipping around in the book a little bit, but I'll say this to you. Me personally, don't take what I'm fixing to say the wrong way. You got to have prayer to lead people the right way when it comes to pastoring. You've got to have prayer. You got to have the power of God on your life. We understand all that. And I don't mean this derogatory, but we know that. That's been preached to us, that's been taught to us. And I'm really looking at some different things as we go through this. Last week we talked a little bit about leadership and praying, and we all prayed together for a while, and that's a good thing. But leadership and people, this was probably one of my favorite chapters in that book. I probably learned as much from this chapter in this book as any other chapter so far, and which I've already read the book through a couple different times, but it's a very interesting chapter. Now, here's something that if you've not done your homework that you'll need to remember. There would be no ministry if there were not for people. If it were not for people, we wouldn't have a ministry. And I've heard preachers say this, well, I just can't stand people. Well, you're in the wrong ministry. It's not a profession, but if you want to look at it that way, you're in the wrong profession, because we got to have people to have a ministry. Many pastors struggle in ministry because they do not know how to lead people correctly. They don't know how to lead people correctly. And you know, I've heard this say, well, I'm just not a people person. Well, if you're going to pastor, you're going to have to become a people person. And you say, well, I don't like people. Well, you're going to have to learn to like people. You're going to pastor, and I'll just say it this way, if you're going to be in any leadership, secular or spiritually, you're going to have to learn how to deal with people. Now, I'll say this to you, people will get on your nerves. People will cause you to go home on Sunday afternoons and shave your head bald so you don't pull all your hair out. People will absolutely drive you crazy, but you have to learn how to deal with people, leadership and people. Now, Brother Mike deals with 3 different styles of leadership in this chapter when it comes to leadership and people. He deals with a positional leader, a connectional leader, and an influential leader. With each of these leadership styles, there's a positive side, a negative side, and a people side. So we're going to look at these 3 different types of leaders tonight and see what we can learn from it. And at the end of it, I want you to evaluate yourself and see which type of leader you would consider yourself to be. Now, again, there is the positional leader, there is the connectional leader, and the influential leader. That's something that I would put in my memory bank and remember here in about 8 or 9 weeks whenever you take an exam. Is those 3 different types of leaderships. All right? Let's look, number 1, at the positional leader tonight. A positional leader tonight. A positional leader is simply this. You do it because I'm the leader and I told you to do it. Now we can go into great depths of what it is, but simply that's what it is. Dakota, you sweep that floor because I'm the pastor and I said to do it. You set these tables up because I am Brother Jeremy and I pastor this church. Now get the tables set up, the chairs off of them. Let's go to class. That is a position leader. It's because I said so. Miss Leslie, step outside and call Miss Vicky. She just called me and Tim did too. And here's let's look at this. Here's a positive side, if there is a positive side to positional leader. Here it is. You do have authority over others. You do. You do have authority over others. Here's another positive side of it and an encouraging side of it, if you want to look that way. Somebody saw something in you to put you in the place of leadership. You may say, well, God put me in this place of leadership. But I want to say this to you. God may have put you, let me put it this way. There's God's will and there's man's will, and man's will can get in the way of God's will. So it could be God's will for you to be at that church, but man could halt that. Man could not vote you in. I've said this many times. I may go into church tomorrow night and they vote out as pastor. Have they missed God's will for their church? Absolutely, because I feel it's God's will for me to be there right there. So here's somebody saw something in you to put you in a position of leadership. So as we think about it, then there is that positive side. If you want to look at it that way, you may say, well, I feel like a failure. Well, somebody believed in you and put you there. If you are a pastor, ultimately, God put you in that position. Ultimately, it was God that put you in that place of leadership, and God put you in that place of leadership. So here's the reason why. So you could train others around you and develop other leaders around you. So think about that. Now here's a negative side to it. Negative side to positional leader, someone who is a positional leader and has no desire for personal growth, has the mindset of being a ruler or a dictator. This person wants other people to serve simply because he said so. That is a negative side to a positional leader. Now, here is the people side to the positional leadership. One response is that people will just put the necessary time in. People will not go over and for you. Why? Because you are a positional leader. If somebody is just cracking all the time, and they're not in there helping me, I have no desire to go over and beyond for that person. So there's the positional leader. I want to ask you this question tonight. Are you a positional leader? Do you tell people to do things in your leadership capacity and expect them to do it just because? Now, hear me and hear me well. If we're in a pastoral leadership, then others should respect us and do that. However, we should respect others. So there's the positional leader. Number two, now we have a lot to cover tonight, so it's the reason I'm moving quick. There is the connectional leader. There's a positional leader. Do it. But then there's also a connectional leader. Well, what is a connectional leader? I would say it this way. This person truly believes that the greatest gifts that are around him are the people that God has given him. The greatest gifts around him are the people that God has given him. This leader actually looks for ways to connect with those in the church or his group. There are some great benefits from being a connectional leader. Some great benefits from being... Is Miss Vicky okay? Or that's about that other? Okay. There's some great benefits from it. Now, I'm sorry, I know I jumped off track right there, but Miss Vicky usually don't call me 3 times back to back. That's right. I'm trying to be a connectional leader and check on my people. With me. A connectional leader. Here's some of the benefits. First, you will put your heart into your ministry and your people. When you're connected, it's not their church, it's our church. You're connected with those people. You want to see the church grow. You want to, and I'll say more about this as I go on, as we look at an influential leader. You want to be involved with them. You don't want to sit on a pedestal and say, do the work. The connectional, you're connected with your people. You remember years ago, Verizon had that commercial, and they would do this. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? You know what? There's a lot of pastors walking around today going, can you hear me now? And it's because they are positional leaders and they're not connected with their people. They're not connected with their people. Think about this. Sometimes the greatest ideas in ministries come from those whom God has put around you. The greatest ideas. Think about this. That may come through someone who is a companion, your spouse, your children. It may come from someone who is not only a spouse or your children. It may come through someone who is close to you in the ministry. Or it may come from a critic in the ministry. It may come. Brother Steve Pope come preach to our preachers out of the church the other day. And he was talking about when somebody comes to you, somebody approaches you, and Brother Jeremy said this the other night too, we was talking about some of this. He said, look at them and say, well, I tell you what, why don't you pray for me right now that God would give me wisdom on how to... That critic comes to us, and here's what I want us to get from this. When you are that connectional leader, even though that critic may come to you, you just don't react immediately on them. You think about, can I say this? Some of the greatest advice that I've ever had in the ministry come from a critic. Some of the things that I've learned the most in pastor come from people that's not even at our church today. And I'm not talking about Brother Jonathan or Brother Chris or Brother Ryan. I'm talking about people that was critics. What I done, Jeremiah? I listened to what they had to say. I evaluated what they had to say. I thought, you know what our first reaction to do is this. Our first reaction is to bow up. Who are you to question anything that I'm doing? But sometimes we will learn from our critics. That connectional leader, he will learn from those around him. Think about this. Listen to what is being said and do not get caught up on who is saying it. Listen to what's being said and don't get caught up on who is saying it. Connectional leader will also work with his people. He'll work with his people. This leader will roll up his sleeves and get into the trenches with those around him. I thought many times whenever I was reading this, I thought about whenever we set the tent up. Daddy may have stood back and hollered at all of us, but usually me and Brother Jeremy and Brother Brian was right there in the middle of it. Daddy was too. Y'all know I'm just picking with you on that. We was right in the middle of it. Brother Brian was saying, put this pole up here. Brother skid steer. It wasn't because he's scared of heights. But you know what Brother Jeremy was doing come time? Sound check. That don't sound right. That, you know what he's doing? He said he's not scared of width. He's scared of heights. Man, serious and teach a class. You know what that is? That is not positional leadership. That is connection. And I didn't even know what it was. I read this book. That's connectional leadership. That leader gets in there with them. Last year COVID hit. And whenever it hit, we didn't know what finances were going to do at the church. We had a lot of people in healthcare, and the people that works in healthcare you thought would always have a job. And you know what they started? They started furloughing them because Brother Heath got laid off for about 2 months. People started losing jobs. We've always contracted the mowing out on our yard, or at least the past 7 or 8 years. So you know what the first thing we done? We started evaluating what we cut. That was one of the first things we cut. So you know what happened to the youth director and the pastor? We were out there in the old Kubota diesel lawnmower that's been around there for about 30 years. Brother Heath got 3 times the first day. And you know what I could have done? I could have said, you idiot, why did you run it off in that hole? Go get something and pull it out. Went and got a log chain and an old truck and pulled it down there and laid underneath the mower with him and got the chain hooked up and pulled it out, and we went back to work. That is connectional leadership. That connection gets in there with them and works with them. Gets in there with them and works with them. I'll say this yesterday. We were on a part of the trucks out at the road because we couldn't get everything in there. And I was driving one of our engines, and the chief pulled up in another engine. And they called for more help into where the fire was at. So I told the chief, I said, I'll ride in with you. We'll leave the other guys out here at the road. He said, that sounds good. So me and him rolled in. Whenever we rolled in, I looked at him and I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pump the truck. I jumped on the pump panel, went to pulling levers and got water flowing to it. And I looked out there, and you know who was right in the middle of every bit of it? The chief was right in the middle of every bit of it. You know what he could have done? He could have stood on the went to pointing fingers. But what did he do? He was connectional. He got in the mess with everybody else and worked with. So the connectional leader, think about this. This leader, there's some positive. What's the downside to that? Here's the downside. This leader may find that making decisions become harder based on how the people will respond and feel. When you're a connectional leader, if you're not careful, you become close friends with those that you're leading. And when you do have to deal with a situation, you'll find that decision being harder to deal with because you're worried about how they're going to respond to it. You're worried about how they're going to respond to it. Another downside is this. You may get blindsided by people because you let down your guard and become more vulnerable. Think about this. Paul was crushed when he was forsaken by Demas. What's the people side to it? Here's the people side to the connection. As you connect with those in your group, they will be able to understand you and catch your vision with you. They'll be able to understand you and connect your vision with you. So we looked at this, the positional leader, the connectional leader. But then number 3 tonight, I want you to see the influential leader. The influential leader. And let me just say this to you. There is sometimes that you have to be a positional leader. There is going to be sometimes, and I believe Brother Jeremy and Brother Brian will agree with me right here, there is sometimes that you just have to step up and say, because I'm the pastor, that's why. There just is. Like those times, would you agree with me, Brother Jeremy? I don't like times. Would you agree with me, Brother Brian? I don't like those times, but there is, Brother Keith's in a dominant leadership place where he works. And there's probably sometimes, Brother Keith, that you just have to say, no, here's the reason we're going to. Because I am the leader. Brother Ryan is in a dominant leadership position where he works. There's going to be times that they have to go kick the door down, get rowdy with people. And you know what? They might be several opinions, but it's at his house, not his house. His area, you understood what I was saying when I said it was at your house, didn't I? When it's in his area, he's wrote the search warrant. You know, probably times that Ryan's just had to step up and say, no, boys, we're doing it this way because this is at my house. I wrote the search warrant. I'm the one leading this. That's why we're going to do it. But if you can do it a connectional way or an influential way, it's a whole lot better. You want to add anything to it? What about you, Brother Brian? You want to add something to that? Last resort. But there is time. You just have to. Yes, sir. And you better know you're right. You know what I'm saying? You better know you're right. You're leading right when you do it. Go ahead, Brother Jim. Yes, sir. No. No. Yep. That's so true. So there's your positional. The connectional, you connect with people. And I want to say this. That connectional leader, you got to be careful being a connectional leader. My closest, bestest friends are not members of our church. They're not people in our church. My Brother Jeremy. Why? Because when you have to deal with them, when I first took the church, it was like that. And when you have to deal with them on stuff, I thought we was buddies. This don't have nothing to do with being buddies and being best friends. This don't have nothing to do with that. I have, Brother Heath gets paid a little bit. We have a secretary, and I've told them before, there is a worship side to church and there's an administrative side to things. It's a business things. So you got to be careful in connection. Here's the influential. I loved studying this chapter. I really did. Here's the influential leader. This person continues to grow his own life as well as all the people around him. He continues to grow his own spiritual life as well as all of the people around him. He values people as a gift from God, yet his personal life challenges his church or group to aspire for greater personal growth goals. Now, I'll tell you something, an influential leader, here's somebody I think about. I've never stood underneath him as a church member. I've never been a preacher boy under him. I'm just saying as I look at him a lot of times, Brother Steve is somebody that influenced me to want to do more. I watch their services. I watch, even before they went into their humongous building now. And he told me the other day, we was talking, and he said, I was really picking his mind about building a new auditorium, and here's what he said: I built too small. He said, I urge you to do anything, and I've heard you say the same thing about your Sunday school wing. He influences me, man. He makes me want to do something. You take that and you look back, and I don't guess nobody in here really knew him in the early 90s besides me and Brother Jeremy. But you look at what happened at Turner's Creek in the early 90s, even falling into the late 90s. 275 missionaries. The last 3 years, over $1 million through the missions program. In the middle of nowhere, running 800 in the middle of nowhere. You know what it does? It inspires you to want to do. Are you ever around somebody and they inspire you? You know what they are? They're an influential leader. That's what they are. Now, think about this. The influential leader longs to see people develop their own spiritual muscles and walk with the Lord. This leader is wise in investing his time in key people and duplicates himself through training those around him. By training those around him, he is looking at the big picture of leadership. If he trains 3 and they each train 3, then he has trained 12. We need more pastors that will be influential leaders in training their people. Training their people. One of the common statements from pastors is that they cannot train everyone. The key is not training everyone, but training certain ones who then can train the others. Jesus was an influential leader. Look at how he trained the disciples. He had the inner circle, Peter, James, and John. And then he had the other 9 who became the leaders in the early church. It was those who Jesus invested his time in the most: Peter, James, and John. So you said, preacher, what are you saying? No, I can't train all 200 at Amazing Grace. But you know what I can do? I can find a few that wants to be trained, that is interested interested in knowing more, and you can pour your life into them, so in turn they can pour their life into somebody else. Every Sunday morning, we read 11 different preachers' names. 11 different preachers' names that is now sent out of Amazing Grace, that's either pastoring or in missions. And you know what that is? That is somebody that we've tried to invest time in, that we've tried to invest money in, that I personally tried to invest time and money in and pour my life into, so they could do what? So God's called them so they can go out and they can do the same thing. Somebody asked me the other day, said, how many of y'all running now at Amazing Grace? And I thought for a minute to add up all the attendance. Southside, just thinking the ones here, Southside, Shield of Faith, Shining Light, Mountaintop. I told them, I said, we up about 1,300, I think. And they kindly looked at me. Now that's not counting none of the 40 missionaries that we're supporting every month. You said, preacher, what are you saying? Influential, man. Find somebody and pour yourself out into them. Find somebody and pour yourself out into them. That's what the influential leader does. Now, is there a negative side to the influential leader? Sure there is. First, there will be complaints from some that state you have lost your personal touch with them. I'm not going to call no names, but I could call several names right now. People at Amazing Grace that said, well, you know, I just feel that you've lost your personal touch. When you've got 15 or 20, it's easy to talk to everybody. But when your church grows, Brother Brian, thing with me. And here's what I've learned. I'm going to say this, then Brother Jeremy's going to chime in right here. Here's what I've learned. There is some that no matter how much time you put into them. I was talking to one of our deacons today about a couple, and here's what I've told him. I'm not going to tell you how many years, but I told him a certain amount of time, and I said, brother, I have poured my life into them, and they've not changed. They're never going to change, and you cannot just continue to pour your life into a bucket that's got holes in it. Find somebody that will listen and allow you to help them, and then pour into them. Go ahead, Brother Jeremy. Yeah. When I came to First Chapel, I had 19 from the first moment. When I went into the pulpit, I pastored this church as if I had 500 people set. Because, and I did that the way I led a service. I preached as if I had a massive crowd. I conducted myself outside the pulpit as if I had a massive crowd. And I didn't allow that to happen here to me. I still have good relationships. Sure. Yes, sir. Absolutely. I ain't trying to be ugly and mean. They're good people. But you cannot spend 90% of your before church after church with one person. No. As a delegated leader in your church, if you are a deacon, if you're a trustee, if you're a Sunday school teacher, if you're a young preacher, and you see somebody constantly occupying preaching, look at kind of every now and again just non-interference and say, hey, brother, there's so-and-so needs you back in church. Well, you know who it may get you away from that. Man, I'm not trying to be ugly. All okay with that? You're exactly right.
That's the way it is. And that closeness, I love everybody the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Brother Dakota, there's several times that he'll get his stomach. Because at the end of the service, I'll say, Brother Dakota, I need to meet with you and Miss Kelsey after service in the hospitality room. And in doing that, I know there's a vampire there. And here's what they do. Preacher, hey, I got 30 seconds, but I just told that couple I needed to meet with them. We've got to talk about some things. Are you with me? Did I shun those people? No, I talked to them just a minute. And then I went to the hospitality room and we drunk Pepsi. And he gets scared to death every time because he thinks he's in trouble every time I do it to him. Dr. Seitler, if I'm not mistaken, it was Dr. Seitler, 30 minutes before his service, would sit down on the platform, and that was his time. People knew if they wanted to come talk to him, they'd come by and talk to him. Influential leaders is pouring into everybody. There's some people in your church, and y'all chime in. There's some people in your church that you're going to end up becoming a little bit closer to. Number one, because they'll let you. But number two, because they are your workers. And it's not that you're else when you're away from that church. But when you're at the church, they're that laborer. They're that person that's right there in the middle of it with you. So you have to be closer. You have a personal relationship with them. There's a lot of time. Matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, Sunday, I didn't even hardly talk to Brother Heath. We probably didn't say 15 words to each other on Sunday. But he didn't get mad and leave, or I don't guess we didn't have service Sunday night. I'll know tomorrow. Influential. Pour into them, but if there's a negative side, there'll be some that says, you've lost that personal touch. So if I could echo anything that Brother Jeremy just said in closing, I made the same mistake when I went to Amazing Grace. And it took me about 6 or 7 years to realize that. And then you had to shift, and in shifting, well, you don't care about us no more. You don't have time for us no more. This to some of them, I still live in the same place. Still invite me to go. Influential leaders. And then here's another side, a negative side to an influential leader. If you're not careful, the sin of pride will step up. Because that influential leader, you know what's going to happen to the group that they're leading? It's going to grow. It's going to grow. They're going to connect with people, and it's going to grow. Here's the people side of influential leader. The atmosphere and the culture of the church will be growth. Because as you influence them, they catch your vision with you, they catch your burden with you, and it'll grow. How can one go from a positional leader to an influential leader? Or how can they change? Let me give you some suggestions in closing that can help move from one style of leadership to another. First, learn to appreciate your people. You know what? I've got some people, and I pastor them from a distance because I have to. They won't let you pastor them close. Some people my personality and their personality is just not the same. It's just, are they good people? Yes, they're awesome people. Here is a people side of it, or how do I change? Learn to appreciate your people, but let me say this to you. Learn to connect with your people. Learn to connect with your people. In connecting, there's sometimes that I go home and I'll study something or I'll read about something in the secular world, nothing to do with Scripture, in the world, because that's what that individual does. And that way I can talk to them a little bit about it. Learn to connect with your people. Finally, begin to develop other leaders. Develop other leaders. Your church will get to a place where you cannot do everything. And if you continue to do everything, your church will be stumped. It will be stumped, and stunt it in its growth. It won't go but so far. It will not go but so far. Learn to develop leaders and train leaders. And whenever you give them something, I said this the other day, I can't remember where it was at. Whenever you give them something, let them have ownership of it. I said this, it might have been when we had all the preachers. If I was to go to youth church Sunday morning, we have youth church on Sunday morning for ages 3 to 11. One of the main reasons we do that is to give us more room in our auditorium right now. And if I was to go to youth church one Sunday morning and direct youth church and lead youth church, I would probably lead it completely different than Brother Heath. Does that mean I'm right and he's wrong? Or he's wrong and I'm right? Or I'm right and he's wrong? Did y'all catch it? I was right all 3 times. No. That simply means that I'm going to lead it a little bit different. But I've given him that. If he's preaching the Word to them, if nobody's getting hurt, if nobody's cussing each other out, if he's not whooping the children, if everything's all right, then just let him do it. What happens a lot of times in leadership is those guys will do things, those Sunday school teachers will do things, well, we think it ought to be done different. Let me ask you a question. Number one, are they teaching the Scripture? Are they teaching the Scriptures? Are they teaching false doctrine? If they're teaching the Scriptures, they're not teaching false doctrine, nobody's getting hurt, it'll be all right. It'll be all right. We're criticized because of this. Our young adult Sunday school class, especially because Brother Jonathan used to teach it and led them this way, is in the fellowship hall. And you know what they have every Sunday morning? They have breakfast. They'll have some kind of snack. They'll have donuts. They have all kinds of stuff. That's the only reason Dakota goes out there. They have coffee. And now, I'm really going to lose something right here, but they have small group to begin with. The men go to one side, the ladies go to the other side. One of our older women leads a quick little Bible study on prayer. They pray together and share their week with each other. Our men does that on this side. And you know what? When they first come to me and said something to me about it, I said, I don't know about that. I said, just try it and let me know how it goes. And you know what we seen? We seen that Sunday school class grow and develop in to the biggest Sunday school class at our church. They're still teaching the Word of God. They're still teaching to them. They're still loving on them. They open up with each other. They talk more. They pray more. So you know what? When you develop a leader and turn them loose, even though they may not lead identical to you, as long as they're in the Scriptures, as long as they ain't doing something plumb off the wall, it's all right. Our message is the same, but every once in a while our methods will change. I still wear a suit. I still preach out of the King James Bible. Developing leaders. If you want to live forever, besides in heaven, develop leaders and train those leaders to develop leaders. Because you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pour into Brother Dakota all I can. And one day he's going to go out and pasture. And I'm going to die off the scene. And you know what he's going to do? He's going to take some traits that I've trained him with, and he's going to pour it into somebody else. And you know what? He's going to die off the scene. And you know what this guy 3, 4, 5 generations down the road is going to say? You know what? I had a preacher that had a preacher that had a preacher that had a preacher. And it's not all about me, but listen, that had a pastor, and his name was Jonathan Barker. And here's what he done with him. He developed him, he led him, and he poured into me, and he poured into me. Influential leadership. Connectional and influential is where you want to be. Every once in a while you have to be positional, but let it be the last resort. Father, thank you for this time together. We love you.